Before Jesus called Lazarus out of the tomb, he didn't beg or bargain. He thanked God out loud for an answer no one else could see. Over and over, before every miracle, there's a hidden pattern modern Christianity rarely mentions. A secret interior act, not a public plea. If prayers today feel powerless, it might be because this step vanished. But what actually happened inside that inner room? The story begins with a prayer almost everyone overlooks. At the entrance to Lazarus's tomb, the air hung heavy with the stench of 4 days' decay. Martha's warning about the smell echoed in the minds of those gathered, yet Jesus didn't hesitate. He didn't plead, didn't bargain, didn't even ask. Instead, he lifted his eyes and spoke words almost no one expected. "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. Not please hear me, not if it be your will, but you have heard me." The prayer wasn't a request for intervention. It was gratitude for something already accomplished in a reality no one else could see. The miracle hadn't happened yet, but Jesus spoke as if it was already finished. Only after this moment of thanks did he call Lazarus out. The sequence was unmistakable. First, an interior certainty expressed as gratitude. Then, the impossible unfolding in plain sight. In that brief pause, a hidden structure of prayer surfaced, one that stands in sharp contrast to the way most prayers are offered today. In Capernaum, a paralyzed man was lowered through a crowded roof, surrounded by the noise and urgency of desperate friends. Jesus paused, saw their faith, and then spoke words of healing. No outward plea, no visible ritual, just a moment of silent recognition before action. On a Galilean hillside, thousands waited with empty stomachs and anxious eyes. Jesus took 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up to heaven, and simply gave thanks. There was no request for provision, only gratitude and an unspoken certainty that what was needed was already present. The bread multiplied after that moment of alignment, not before. Later, after a day of teaching and miracles, Jesus climbed a mountain alone. He spent hours in solitude while his disciples struggled against a storm on the lake below. Only after this time apart, withdrawn, silent, in prayer, did he walk across the water to meet them. Across these stories, a pattern surfaces. Whether in the middle of a crowd or alone on a mountainside, Jesus moved into a quiet interior space before every act that defied explanation. The details differ, but the sequence is unmistakable. Withdrawal, alignment, then power. In the ancient world, the word Jesus used in Matthew 6:6, tamon, carried a weight most modern readers miss. A tamon was not just a bedroom or a quiet corner. In Greek, it meant an inner chamber, a storeroom, or even a treasury. A place set apart from the noise and traffic of daily life, reserved for things of value and secrecy. Lexicographers trace the root back to the idea of something deliberately cut off, a compartment hidden within the house. In the Septuagint, tamon describes Joseph's granaries and the temple's treasury, spaces of protection and provision. When Jesus told his followers to pray in the tamon, he was not prescribing a location so much as pointing to a practice. Withdraw from the outer world, enter the most interior space available, and close the door. Early Christian commentators like Origen saw this as a call to step beyond public performance, into a chamber where only the unseen Father listens. The instruction was clear. Real prayer begins in the place no one else can access, where authenticity replaces spectacle. In the barren silence of the Egyptian desert, long after the first churches filled with crowds and ritual, A man named Abba Simeon sat alone each night, drawing breath in the darkness. His companions called him a father, though he owned nothing and spoke little. The Apophthegmata Patrum records his practice. Simeon would close his eyes, focus on the rhythm of his breathing, and allow every word and thought to fall away until only presence remained. He did not pray for the world to change. He became still, attentive, waiting within the inner room that Jesus described. Not a place built of stone, but a hidden chamber carved out by silence and surrender. Simeon's disciples noticed he returned from these nights with a quiet strength, able to meet suffering and joy with the same gentle gaze. While the empires shifted and doctrines multiplied, this method survived, not in the halls of power, but in the hearts of those who kept watch in the night, breathing in the ancient rhythm, guarding a living lineage that refused to vanish. When Christianity moved from the margins to the center of the Roman world, the rhythm of faith began to change. In 313 CE, the Edict of Milan legalized Christian worship, opening the doors for public gatherings and grand basilicas. Bishop Eusebius, writing from Caesarea, described a new era of communal devotion, crowds assembling for liturgy, prayers rising together in unison. The faith that once thrived in hidden rooms and desert silence now found itself woven into the fabric of empire. Uniformity became the goal. Bishops debated the timing of Easter, councils set standards for worship, and prayers became structured, recited, repeated. In his letters, Eusebius praised these public rituals for their order and unity, but the practice of solitary withdrawal, the quiet entry into the inner chamber, grew less visible. The spiritual treasury Jesus described was never outlawed, but as Christianity scaled up, the preference shifted. Rituals could be taught, measured, and enforced. Silence, by its nature, could not. The contemplative lineage endured in monastic outposts, but for most, prayer became something to perform, not a chamber to enter. Dr. Leah Morris, a neuroscientist specializing in contemplative states, studies what happens in the brain when people attempt silent prayer or meditation. Using fMRI, her team measures activity in the default mode network, the set of brain regions most active during self-focused thinking, rumination, and the feeling of being separate from everything else. In 2021, their scans showed that experienced practitioners of silent prayer could reduce default mode network activity by up to 65%. Participants described a sense of quiet presence, a loss of anxious self-talk, and a feeling of connection that words couldn't quite capture. For many, this was the first time prayer didn't feel like speaking into a void. Instead, the usual mental chatter faded, replaced by a stillness that felt alive. Dr. Morris explains that this state isn't about believing harder or asking louder. It's about shifting the brain's operating mode. When the default network quiets, the sense of separation dissolves, and prayer becomes less about reaching out and more about tuning in to something already present. In John 14:10, Jesus said, "The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works." This wasn't a claim of personal power, but a statement of unity. Jesus described a relationship where asking and waiting for an answer was replaced by a kind of inner coherence. What he said and did flowed from a place where the boundary between himself and the source was thin, almost invisible. Prayer, in this light, wasn't about convincing God or pleading for intervention. It was about entering a state where the will of the Father and the actions of the Son moved together. The miracles didn't begin with a request, they began with alignment. This is the distinction modern Christianity rarely draws. Prayer as union, not transaction. Michael Hayes sits in silence, eyes closed, hands resting gently on his knees. He begins with a slow inhale, then releases the breath, letting the tension in his shoulders drop away. The first phase is simple. Breathe and notice the swirl of thoughts. With each exhale, he quietly lets go. First of the day's worries, then of the constant stream of inner commentary. After a few minutes, the mind's noise fades. In the second phase, he feels for the quiet behind the thoughts, not chasing silence, but allowing it to surface. Next, he rests in that stillness, resisting the urge to fill it with words or requests. Finally, he opens to presence, aware, receptive, no longer trying to make anything happen. Practitioners like Hayes report a 68% improvement in their sense of connection and clarity. St. John of the Cross called this space the silent music, the soundless sound. Today, neuroscience confirms what mystics knew. Our deepest transformation begins in silence, not speech. As noise and distraction escalate, rediscovering this interior practice could reshape spiritual life for millions. The door Jesus described is still there. The question is, will we step inside? Share your thoughts below.